Hello there, my sleepy nights. And tonight, we have a collection of Game of Thrones tales. In the cramped cabin of a ship, bound for the ruins of old Valyria, Malian the Twisted, a renegade maester of dark reputation, plucked at the strings of his Valyrian glass harp. Each note shrieked with an unearthly dissonance that echoed the death cries of the ancient freehold. Torchlight flickered across his gaunt features, highlighting the knotted scars that marked him as much as the maester's chain around his neck. Across from him sat Daemon Brightflame, a prince of House Targaryen, whose violet eyes reflected both the dancing flames and deeper emotions. Fear, anticipation, longing. His silver gold hair and noble bearing marked him as one of the dragon lords of old, though now their legacy existed mainly in ruins and whispered tales. A bleak June for one so near his triumph, Daemon murmured, his gaze drifting across the sulphur-tinged cabin. Has your own prophecy unsettled you? Or is it the weight of these dragon eggs you covet? Malian's laugh rang brittle as snapped glass. Power, my prince. You speak of it so lightly. You cannot fathom what I shall achieve once these eggs are mine. I will resurrect glories lost in the doom, raise creatures of flame and scale, thought long extinguished. I will pry open the hidden vaults of Valyrian lore, where even the dragon lords dared not tread. The very laws of life and death shall bend beneath my will. He twisted his lips into a grin, and yet you still hesitate, Daemon said. The eggs. Malian's voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. The eggs. They speak in the blackness. Their song is not like mortal music. It is a dirge of the doom itself. Cursed, corrupted. I feel that same taint creeping along my spine. The flames of R'hllor show every man his fate, Damon replied, though he felt the dark influence that thrived in the shadows. In the morn, we set sail for the smoking sea. And so, come dawn, Damon mounted Moonfire, his trusted dragon, whose silver-white scales gleamed like freshly fallen snow against the grey gloom. The beast's presence was both a comfort and a reminder of his house's dwindling power. One of the few living dragons still bound to Targaryen blood. Balin followed in a battered galley, its hull streaked with tar and bedecked in bone charms. His crew, tongueless men, mutilated for secrecy, worked with grim efficiency beneath the watchful eyes of their master. For 7 long days, they ventured across waters that hissed like a witch's brew. The oppressive heat of day gave way to clammy, ash-laden nights. And even from Moonfire's back, Damon tasted the acidic bite of steam rising off the waves, where grotesque creatures, half fish and half nightmare, lurked in the depths. The galley's crew huddled together when off duty, mouthing soundless prayers. If the horrors of the smoking sea didn't claim them, Malian's scholarship might. And on the 8th day, they reached the true threshold of the smoking sea. Towering spires of black stone jutting from the waters like jagged teeth The air wavered with malignant heat, an eerie hush broken only by steam's hiss. This was the graveyard of empires, where even the mighty Valerian freehold had met its end. No gulls circled these skies. No fish broke the rolling surface. It was a dead realm, lifeless yet watching. Before them rose a colossal barrier of volcanic glass, its peak vanishing into swirling clouds. The wall glimmered with spectral hues of deep purple and crimson in the dying light. Damon circled overhead, searching for a perch, while the galley drifted near the glassy cliffs. Through their bond, he felt Moonfire's apprehension at this unnatural formation. Part of him urged retreat, but the prophecy and promise of dragon eggs bound him like chains. There, Malian's voice rang thin, excitement edged with desperation. Beyond that wall lies the vault of Vagar, the culmination of every sacrifice. He scuttled forward with spider-like agility, his maester's chain rattling a discordant chorus. The path upward was treacherous, barely more than a thread across volcanic glass. Damon edged along narrow ledges, pulse thundering as noxious fumes stung his eyes and set his lungs ablaze. His hands bled on razor-sharp obsidian, while Moonfire used her wings to stabilize their passage, sending gusts of scorching air through the narrow passages. Above, Malian moved with unsettling purpose, as if guided by unseen hands. Each clink of his chain seemed to carry the weight of ancient curses. They climbed for hours until night swallowed the world. Stars emerging like silver sparks in the ash-filled sky. When Damon finally caught up to Malian on a wide ledge, his limbs trembled with exhaustion from the ascent. "Look," the master breathed, pointing downward with a shaking hand. Damon lifted his gaze and beheld a vista that defied all sense of sanity or mercy. At the foot of the slope stretched a river of molten rock, its surface white-hot and still as frozen time. Beyond lay an expanse of black sand and obsidian spires, strewn with dragons' bones. Massive ribs, arching skyward like shattered ships. Heaps of vertebrae fused and warped by flame. In the distance, a ring of flames flickered between lurid green wildfire and sullen embers. Within that hypnotic circle, Damon glimpsed a shadow that seized his heart. A dragon, twisted into something neither living nor dead. Malian's face went bone white. Vagar. Vagar the corrupted, he choked out, bearing the crown of the doom. Damon, we must go back. We must go to King's Landing, the Citadel, anywhere. Let us be wise. Let us live. For a heartbeat, Damon felt an urge to heed Malian's plea. His eyes flicked to the plain below, where scattered bones told stories of old dragons and old kings, of power and pride extinguished by horrors of their own making. A part of him feared such a fate. Another part of him felt a pull at the thought of laying claim to the dragon eggs. Could he not be the one to harness such ancient might. The weight of Targaryen heritage, the memory of Valeria's downfall, gripped him in equal measure, stirring both ambition and dread. Finally, he set his jaw. Flee, if you like, Melian. But I am Targaryen. If that creature threatens our world, I must end it. You brought me here to face what was once our greatest ally, to recover the eggs and halt this corruption. By next moon, it will be done. But I shall lie among these bones. He left Melian frozen in fear and descended the eastern slope. The molten river's heat singed his face, its channel wider than expected. Through their bond, he felt Moonfire's apprehension as she waited above, unwilling to risk the obsidian banks. And through curtains of scalding steam, a flat-bottomed craft of black iron emerged, guided by neither current nor tide. And at its prow stood a figure wearing midnight robes, a face hidden behind a porcelain mask, etched with glowing Valerian ruins. What fool treads the realm of death and madness? The figure called. Daemon Targaryen, I've come to slay Vhagar, the corrupted, whatever that beast may be. A mocking laugh whispered behind the mask. Then enter dragon blood, and I shall ferry you across these fires. The voice held ancient knowledge, as if it had witnessed the rise and fall of empires from this very shore. As Damon boarded, the vessel glided over the molten surface without sail or oar, defying natural law. The heat was overwhelming, yet the iron deck remained cool beneath his feet. How do you plan to kill it? The entity asked. Hollowed eyes fixed on Dark Sister. The ancestral Valyrian steel blade that had tasted dragon's blood before. With Valyrian steel, Damon said, resting his hand on the sword's ancient hilt, though doubt twisted in his stomach. I mean to free Vhagar from this abomination. The name felt heavy on his tongue. Vhagar, once mount to Queen Visenya, now twisted by dark magics into something unspeakable. The stranger's mask tilted, ruins pulsing with an inner light. It wears the crown of the doom, steeped in magic that broke Valyria. Its breath melts stone. Its eyes shatter minds. Even your dragon would succumb to its flame. They paused, and Damon heard what seemed like 1,000 whispered voices, carried on a sulphurous wind. No mortal has faced that power and lived. I do not claim immortality, Damon replied, standing straighter despite the oppressive heat. Only a duty to my blood and realm. The words of his house echoed in his mind. Fire and blood. Perhaps both would be required here. Then heed my counsel, the pilot intoned as they neared the far shore, where obsidian sand glittered like broken stars. Vhagar follows the same path each dawn to drink liquid fire. Dig a pit in its tail. Let Valerian steel drink its fill. When Damon's feet touched ground, and he turned to thank his mysterious guide, the boat had already vanished into the vapors. Like a dream upon waking, only ripples in the molten current suggested it had ever existed. Looking back across the river of fire, he knew there could be no retreat. With Dark Sister at his side, and the blood of the dragon roaring in his veins, he pressed forward into this fiery landscape, resolved to carve his place in history, or die trying. Along the riverbank, he found Vagar's trail, a vast gouge cut by the dragon's bulk and vile sorceries. The edges gleamed like diseased glass, radiating malice. Following the masked figure's counsel, Damon knelt where the ground sloped and began carving a pit with Dark Sister. The Valerian steel cut through obsidian with unnatural ease, as if sensing its purpose. And by ashen dawn, his trap was ready. Exhausted, he crouched within the trench as the horizon bled red. Then came the thunderous roar. Vagar the Corrupted emerged through the haze, its approach heralded by shrieking metal and the rattle of infernal chains that bound its limbs. The crown of the doom sat half sunken in its flesh, glowing like an eternal wound. Green fire flickered in its eyes, shot through with veins of black. Damon tightened his grip on Dark Sister, fighting revulsion at this twisted remnant of Targaryen legacy. When Vagar's massive form blocked the dawn light, he struck. The blade plunged deep with a sickening crunch. The dragon's death roar shook the world. As it collapsed, the crown shattered, each shard wailing as it struck earth. Then silence fell. Broken only by blood sizzling on stone. Just then, the morning sun cut through the gloom, and something shifted in the land, as if an ancient curse had loosened its grip. Even the wind changed, carrying hints of brine instead of just sulfur. Damon slumped against rock. Dark Sister trembling in his hand, triumph warring with sorrow in his heart. Moonfire descended, her silver-white scales pristine against the desolation. But before Damon could take comfort in her presence, another figure emerged from the mists. Malian stood watching, his face a mask of cold calculation. And above, feral dragons circled the corpse, while two snow-white ravens, messengers of the three-eyed crow, glided down. The deed is done, one raven spoke. Why does the Dragon Lord linger? Let him seek renown by purer means, its companion warned before whispering, Beware, Malian. His heart is darker than the smoking sea steps. The birds vanished, leaving Damon to face the maester, whose eyes now blazed with mad fervor. All mine, knowledge. I shall bend it to my will. You are merely my tool, princeling. You've been consumed by ambition, Damon said calmly. Let us return to safer lands. You dare speak of safety after slaying my dragon, Malian raged. Blood must answer for blood. He hurled a dragonglass blade at Damon's chest. Thief of fire. The eggs are mine, by sacred right. Before Damon could parry, the maester's foot slipped on a slick pool of the corrupted dragon's blood. He lost his balance and fell upon Dark Sister's waiting edge. The Valerian steel parted him, as though he were but parchment. Gasping, Malian slid to the ground, eyes wide with shock and betrayal. Damon staggered back, horrified. The sword tore free of his grasp, clattering into a steaming fissure where the fiery current hissed in protest. Malian's body collapsed at Damon's feet, and the prince smelled the copper tang of blood, warring with the reek of sulphur. A sick revulsion churned in Damon's gut. He stared at Malian's still form, the man undone by his own greed and madness. How many men had to die for this? How many illusions had he shattered? The old maester had guided him here, with promises of knowledge and power. Yet in the end, all that remained was another corpse in a land of bones. Shaken, Damon turned to find Moonfire, crouching protectively nearby. He gently placed a hand upon her snout, feeling the warmth of her breath against his palm, and drew a ragged breath. This is a place of death, he said softly, to the silent ruin around him. true glory cannot be born of such slaughter. Let the eggs rot in their ancient vault. May the realm remember me for deeds less soaked in blood. Mounting his dragon, Daemon beat a hasty retreat from that poisoned shore. Over the rolling mists, Moonfire's powerful wings propelled them onward, seeking the edges of the smoking sea. Bit by bit, the air grew fresher, the sky less choked by ash. By the time dusk gathered along the horizon, Daemon felt as though 1,000 invisible chains had fallen away from him. They soared until the waves shifted into a gentler hue, and at last they came upon the black sand beaches skirting the narrow sea, where tangles of driftwood replaced scorched obsidian. There, Daemon dismounted. Exhaustion claimed him as soon as his boots touched solid ground. He slumped on a smooth rock near the water's edge. Moonfire curling beside him. Sky overhead was indigo and silver, strewn with stars that gradually emerged, with a pale moon that climbed towards its zenith. He remained there for long hours, lost in his thoughts. Where once he had been driven by prophecy, curiosity, the pride of House Targaryen. Now he felt only a hollow ache, relieved by small glimpses of hope. And as dawn's first light colored the east with faint gold, Daemon glimpsed the distant towers of Volantis, wavering in the morning haze, a promise of new lands and new roads. A dark, sailed vessel slid into view, bearing the three-headed dragon of his house upon its canvas. Damon rose, brushing sand from his cloak as the ship approached. Its crew brought it ashore smoothly, and Damon saw an archmaester standing at the prow, an unmistakable Valyrian steel link shining among the many metals of his chain. A lilting melody drifted across the gentle waves. The Archmaester's harp, intricately carved Valyrian glass, catching the first rays of the sun. Hail, Damon Brightflame, the scholar called, stepping lightly onto the black sand. You wear a haunted look. Where do you journey this day? Fatigue weighed in Damon's voice. I have fled a land of horrors, Archmaester, and would find a kinder shore, if any such place remains of this world. The Archmaester, introducing himself as Valix, inclined his head with a warm smile. Then come with me. The realm festers in darkness. I go to spread knowledge, to lift the shadows, and to kindle what small sparks of wonder we may yet find. You speak like a prophet or a dreamer, said Damon. Tell me truly who you are, and I shall follow you to the ends of the known world. Thus, on that black beach, with the narrow sea stretching before him, Damon found a fragile sense of renewal. The silver-white shape of Moonfire rose over the ship, ever watchful. A new journey beckoned, one tainted by the madness of the smoking sea, where legends and atrocities were one and the same. For the first time in many nights, the prince felt the faint stirrings of hope, and he lifted his head to watch Valix begin his tale. The bright notes of the harp weaving into the salt-laced breeze. And so Daemon Brightflame left the reeking ashes of Valeria behind, resolved to search out a better destiny, one of wonder rather than ruin, a destiny free of the crown of the doom's shadow. I am Valix of the Citadel, the Archmaester said in a clear, melodic voice. Daemon's weary gaze swept across the deck, taking in the strange and wondrous sight. Heaps of blue winter roses and dragon's breath flowers adorned the planks, their petals vibrant and unscorched despite the salt air. Overhead, ravens and doves circled the ship's tall masts, their calls blending into a natural chord that was oddly harmonious, as if the very wind had bent to Valix's will. Here was a man spoken of in whispers throughout the 7 kingdoms, the scholar of magic and music. Some claimed Valix once spent a year among the children of the forest, learning to hear the deep songs of the earth and the lullabies of hidden waters beneath the wall. Others insisted he had bent krakens to his bidding, or sung storms into silence. The truth, so far as Daemon could guess, was that the Archmaester's greatest gifts lay not in any single feat of sorcery, but in knowing. Wherever there lingered a lost scroll of Valerian lore, a half-forgotten prophecy scrawled in the margins of a maester's tomb, or a stirring of ancient magic among the hard trees, Valix somehow stood at the cusp, ready to witness and learn. When Valix positioned his Valerian glass harp beneath his chin and ran deft fingers across its shimmering strings, the resulting music gripped Daemon's heart like a lover's hand, tender yet arresting. It was said that shadow cats and the frost fangs crawled from their dens at the mere echo of Valix's notes, that dragons in flight would pause, enthralled, their wings outstretched against the sky. Now Damon believed every tale. A hush settled over the restless waves as the narrow sea itself strained to listen. Even moonfire circling overhead let out a low croon, part of curiosity, part reverence. The Archmaister's soft, measured words carried power too. People spoke of him summoning creatures from the depths, coaxing watchers in the weir woods to share their secrets, and persuading lords and kings to set aside vendettas. He knew the speech of ravens, the hum of distant waterfalls, the hidden songs carried on the ocean breeze. In his star-cast charts, Felix had traced the outlines of doom and deliverance, gleaning portents of ice and fire. Each day he supposedly communed with the three-eyed crow, finding new threads in the ever-weaving tapestry of fate. And once each year, he took a ship and journeyed to the far reaches of the known world, sowing seeds of enlightenment where darkness threatened to consume all. Damon, who had just escaped the smoking sea, with both his life and spirit barely intact, felt a flicker of relief. Here was a guide, unburdened by obsessions like Malian's, a man whose quest seemed tied to knowledge rather than dominion. Here was a chance for the prince to carve a path untainted by the venom of old curses. Gradually, the Archmaister's lilting tune mingled with the salt-scented air, bringing forth a sudden, gentle wind out of the south. The black sail stirred, filling with that warm breeze. The ship lurched into motion, the deck's floral scents, winter roses mingling with the spicy tang of dragon's breath blossoms. The vessel sliced through the narrow sea, leaving behind the grim shadows of Valeria's remnants. Damon's thoughts drifted, unbidden to the dragon eggs, left amid the carnage. He pictured them lying in darkness, waiting for another ambitious soul to stumble upon them Perhaps in time, someone else, someone madder or braver, will dare to claim them. A flicker of guilt nagged him. Had he truly averted a greater doom, or merely delayed it? Still, as Felix's harp cast its spell upon the crew, the prince found himself breathing more easily. The wail of nightmares receded and the tension ebbed from his muscles. And so, Damon Brightflame sailed away from the smoking sea, bound for fresh horizons, guided by a man whose knowledge and goodness stood in stark contrast to the twisted ambition of Malian. Together, under the watchful eye of Moonfire, they charted a course that would lead them to the fabled libraries and hidden coves, to half-ruined temples where flickers of old magic slept, and to halls of lords who might yet be swayed by Felix's gift for words and song. It is said that this was the final true tale of Damon Brightflame, the last story told with any certainty of his deeds and whereabouts. In the years since, maesters still debate whether he truly slew a dragon warped by the smoking sea's corruption, or if it was but a fable embroidered with Targaryen pride. Some insist no man could stand against such horrors without succumbing to them himself. Others argue Dark Sisters forging in Valeria gave Damon an edge not granted to ordinary steel. As for the rumored dragon eggs, no traveler has credibly claimed to find them, but neither has anyone proved they no longer exist. Perhaps they still lie in the blackened fissures of that toxic land, waiting for the day when fate draws another soul into Valeria's lethal embrace. And perhaps Damon Brightflame, wherever he roams, remembers that place of ghosts and fire, the place where he glimpsed both the highest glory and the darkest ruin, and swore that his own destiny would walk a different road. In the heart of the Frostfangs, where the ancient stronghold of Winterkeep lay hidden among the snow-capped peaks, there dwelt a legendary mastersmith and warrior known as Marna Ironhand. Her renown spread far and wide, for she had trained the greatest champions of the North, and her skills in both craftsmanship and battle were unmatched. One day, as Marna labored in her forge, her trusted gatekeeper, a grizzled warrior named Branor, approached her with some news. A young warrior approaches the gates, Marna, he said, his voice gruff and low. He bears the markings of a fighter, though he has yet to see his first winter. Marna looked up from her work, her eyes narrowing beneath her thick, soot-stained brows. She was a formidable sight, her muscular frame hardened by countless hours at the forge and in the training yard. Her fiery red hair, braided with beads of iron and obsidian, glinted in the flickering light of the furnace. "A mere lad, you say?" she asked, setting aside her hammer and wiping the sweat from her brow. Branor nodded. "Aye, but he is clad in the garb of a warrior, and he carries himself with the bearing of one who has seen battle." Marna frowned, her mind turning to the treacherous paths that led to her stronghold. For to reach the gates of Winterkeep, it is said, one had to brave the perilous passes of the Frostbanks and the haunted forest, where dire wolves and other creatures of the north lurked in every shadow. There were the caverns of the ice wraiths, long abandoned by the first men, and now infested with dangerous beings, and the Frostfang valleys, where the very air seemed to whisper of ancient evils. If he has come alone, then he must possess great skill and courage, Marna mused, stroking her chin thoughtfully. For none but the bravest and most determined of warriors could have survived such a journey unaided. Branor grunted in agreement, his own weathered face creased with scars of countless battles. He was a warrior of no small renown himself, having served as Marna's right hand and guardian of the gates for more than 2 decades. "What shall we do with the lad then?" he asked, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "Shall I turn him away will grant him entry to the stronghold. Marna was silent for a long moment, her gaze distant and thoughtful. She had seen many young warriors come to her gates over the years, seeking to learn the secrets of her craft and prove their worth in battle. Some had fallen by the wayside, their spirits broken by the rigors of her training. Others had gone on to become great heroes, their names spoken with reverence in the halls of their people. At last, she nodded, her decision made. "Bring the lad to me," she said, her voice ringing with the authority of a master. "If he has braved the perils of the mountains to seek me out, then he must have a stout heart and a fierce determination. I would look upon this young warrior with my own eyes and judge his worth for myself." Ranor bowed his head, his braided beard brushing against his chest. "As you command, Marna," he said, turning to carry out her orders. And so, the stage was set for the arrival of the young warrior, who would soon find himself standing before the legendary Marna Ironhand, ready to face the challenges that lay ahead and prove his mettle in the forge and on the field of battle. With curiosity burning in her heart, Marna made her way to the battlements of her stronghold, eager to catch a glimpse of the young warrior who had dared to brave the perils of the mountains. As she looked out over the snowy landscape, her keen eyes picked out the figure of the approaching warrior, and she saw at once that Branor had spoken true. The lad was indeed young, perhaps no more than 17 years of age, but he carried himself with the confidence and grace of a seasoned fighter. His muscular frame was clad in sturdy armor, and his weapons, a heavy warhammer and a finely crafted sword, were those of a warrior who had seen battle and emerged victorious. At Marna's side, Branor snorted in disdain. "You may have crossed the haunted forest and the Frostfang valleys," he said, his voice dripping with scorn, "but he still has to face the echoing path." Marna nodded, her gaze fixed upon the approaching figure. The echoing path was a treacherous span that crossed a yawning chasm at the entrance to Winterkeep. A final test for those who sought to enter the stronghold. Crafted by the ancient first men in a time long forgotten, the path was said to be imbued with powerful magic that would send any who stepped upon it tumbling to their doom, unless they knew the secret of its crossing. Only Marna and her most trusted disciples were privy to that secret, a closely guarded piece of lore that was passed down from master to apprentice in a sacred ritual of blood and fire. Those who graduated from her tutelage were sworn to keep the secret on pain of death, a bond that could never be broken. As the young warrior approached, Marna and Branor watched with bated breath. To their surprise, the lad did not attempt to cross it immediately, but instead settled himself on the far side of the chasm, building a small fire and resting his weary limbs. Branor chuckled darkly. "He knows he cannot cross," he said, his voice filled with malicious glee. "He waits for us to come and fetch him, like a babe lost in the wilderness." But Marna shook her head, her eyes never leaving the young warrior's face. "No," she said, her voice soft and thoughtful. "He is no fool, this one. He rests now, gathering his strength for the trial ahead. When he is ready, he will make his attempt, and then we shall see if he is worthy of our time and attention." And so they waited. The master smith and her gatekeeper, watching as the young warrior tended to his fire and sharpened his blades. The minutes stretched into hours, and the sun began to sink behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the snow-covered land. But still, the lad did not move, his gaze fixed on the path with a determined intensity that spoke of a will as strong as the very stone of the Frostfangs. And Marna knew, in that moment, that she had found a kindred spirit, a warrior whose heart burned with the same fierce desire for excellence that had driven her to become the greatest of her kind. "He will cross," she said, her voice ringing with certainty. And when he does, we shall see the measure of his worth and the depth of his courage. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, the young warrior suddenly rose to his feet. He took a few steps back from the edge of the chasm, his eyes fixed on the echoing path with a fierce intensity. Then, without warning, he broke into a run, his heavy boots pounding against the stone as he charged towards the path. Marna and Branor watched, their hearts in their throats, as the lad's foot touched the first stone on the path. In an instant, the ancient magic flared to life, and the path bucked and twisted like a wild beast, flinging the warrior backwards with a sickening crack. He landed in a heap on the far side of the chasm, his armor clanging against the rocky ground. Branor let out a bark of laughter, his eyes glinting with malicious amusement. "He's not finished yet," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. But the young warrior was not to be deterred. He picked himself up, dusted off his armor, and charged at the path once more. Again, he was flung backwards, his body twisting in the air like a rag doll. And again, he rose to his feet, his jaw set with grim determination. A third time he tried, and a third time he was repelled by the path's magic. But now, as he picked himself up from the ground, Marna could see a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. He stood for a long moment, his mind working furiously behind his furrowed brow. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, he charged once more, his feet flying over the ground as he raced towards the path. Branor let out a whoop of excitement, his hand closing around the hilt of his sword. "My best blade says he'll be tossed into the chasm this time," he cried, his voice filled with bloodthirsty glee. But Marna only smiled, her eyes never leaving the young warrior's face. "My finest shield says otherwise," she replied, her voice calm and even. And then, in a moment that seemed to stretch for an eternity, the lad's foot touched the center stone of the path. The ancient magic surged, the path buckling and heaving like a wild stallion. But even as it began to rise, the young warrior leapt forward, his powerful legs propelling him across the remaining distance in a single, impossible bound. He landed on the other side of the chasm, his armor clanging against the stone, his chest heaving with exertion. And then, without missing a beat, he strode forward, his fist pounding against the gates of Winterkeep in a thunderous demand for entry. Marna turned to Branor, her eyes glinting with triumph. "Let us go down and greet our new apprentice," she said, her voice ringing with approval, "for he has proven himself worthy in courage and in skill to learn at the feet of Marna Ironhand." Branor grumbled under his breath, his hand already reaching for the sword at his belt to hand it over to his master. But he did as he was bidden, leading the young warrior into the heart of the stronghold, where Marna awaited him with a smile on her face and a gleam of recognition in her eyes. "What is your name, lad?" she asked, her voice soft but commanding. The young warrior bowed his head in respect. "I am called Torrin," he replied, his voice rich with the accent of the north. "And I have come to learn from the greatest master of the north, Marna Ironhand herself." Marna's eyes widened. She had heard tales of this Torrin, a young warrior of Winterfell who had already made a name for himself as a fierce fighter and a cunning strategist. "I have heard of your deeds against the great warg of Winterfell," Marna said, her eyes glinting with recognition. "It is said that the beast had taken over the Wolfswood, terrorizing the small folk who lived nearby. No warrior had been able to stand against it, save for you. Torrin nodded, his face solemn. Aye, it was a fierce battle. The warg was as large as a small mountain, but I could not let it threaten my people any longer. I faced the beast alone, armed with only my hammer and my wits. Marna leaned forward, her voice low and intense. And you slew the warg, they say, with just a single blow from your hammer. The people of Wolfswood were amazed by your feat, but they also mourned the loss of the woods, which had been a great source of beauty and peace for them. Yes, Torrin said, his eyes distant with memory. I knew that I could not let the woods remain abandoned, so I pledged to stand watch over it myself until a new guardian could be found to take the place of the warg. I became the Hammer of Winterfell, the protector of the Wolfswood. Then you are thrice welcome here, Torrin, Marna said, her voice ringing with approval. For you have proven yourself a true hero of our people. In the background, Branor glowered, his eyes dark with jealousy. He had considered himself the greatest of Marna's apprentices, the one destined to inherit her mantle of leadership. But now, seeing the way the master smith looked at Torrin, he felt a cold knot of fear and anger tighten in his gut. As the evening meal began, Marna's daughter, Lyra, moved among the tables, serving the apprentices with a graceful hand. She was a stunning beauty, with hair the color of spun gold and eyes as blue as the summer sky. It was said that she had inherited her mother's skill at the forge, as well as her fierce independence. When Lyra came to Torrin, she held out a platter of roasted boar. The scent of the meat mingling with the smoke from the torches on the wall. As Torrin reached out to take the platter, his hand brushed against hers, and a shock of electricity seemed to pass between them. In that moment, Torrin forgot his own strength. His hand closed around Lyra's wrist, and there was a sickening crack as the delicate bones snapped under his grip. Lyra cried out in pain, the platter falling from her hands and clattering to the floor. Torrin leapt to his feet, his face ashen with horror. "My lady," he gasped, dropping to his knees before her. "I beg your forgiveness. I did not mean to hurt you." Lyra, her face tight with pain, nodded slowly. "I know you did not," she said, her voice soft but strained. "I forgive you, Torrin." But Branor, seeing his chance to undermine Torrin's standing, leapt forward with a snarl of rage. "You dare to lay your hands on the daughter of Marna Ironhand," he roared, his hand reaching for his sword. "I challenge you to single combat, Torrin of Winterfell. We shall see if your hammer is as quick as your temper." Lyra protested, insisting that she had already forgiven Torrin for the accident. But Branor would not be dissuaded. He hurled insults at the young warrior, accusing him of cowardice and weakness. Torrin stood quietly, his face a mask of calm even as Branor hurled insults at him. He knew that the older warrior was only looking for an excuse to challenge him, driven by jealousy and wounded pride. And he would not give him the satisfaction of losing his temper. The master healer of Winterkeep, an old woman named Ygritte, came rushing into the hall, drawn by the cry of Lyra's pain. With gentle hands, she examined the girl's wrist, setting the broken bone and applying some healing herbs to dull the pain. All the while, Branor continued his tirade, taunting Torrin with cruel jibes about his parentage. It was well known that Torrin's father, Harren, had disappeared years ago on a quest beyond the wall. Some whispered that he had abandoned his family, driven mad by grief and despair. Torrin gritted his teeth, fighting back the urge to lash out at Branor for his insults. "Choose your weapon," Torrin said at last, his voice cold and hard as steel. If you are so eager to test your skills against mine, then let us do it properly. Branor's eyes glittered with malice. Axes, he spat, in the training yard. Now. Torrin nodded, his face grim. So be it. As the two warriors strode out into the courtyard, Marna watched, high from a window, her face unreadable. She knew that she could stop the fight with a single word, but she chose not to. This was a test, she knew, of Torrin's mettle and his worthiness to be her apprentice. If he could best Branor, who was widely regarded as the greatest axe fighter in Winterkeep, then he would prove himself a true champion of the North. The fight began with a clash of steel on steel as Branor charged forward with a roar. His twin axes whirling in a blur of motion. Torrin stood his ground, his own axe held low and ready, watching his opponent with a calculating eye. Branor pressed his attack, raining down blow after blow on Torrin's defenses. But the young warrior was quick and agile, dodging and weaving away from the older man's strikes with a fluid grace that belied his strength and size. Suddenly, Torrin saw his opening. As Branor raised his axes high for a final crushing blow, Torrin lunged forward, his own axe flashing in a blinding arc of motion. The blade caught Branor square in the chest, piercing through his armor and driving the breath from his lungs. Branor staggered back, his axes falling from nerveless fingers as he collapsed to the ground. He lay there, gasping for air, as Torrin stood over him, his axe poised for a killing blow. But Torrin did not strike. Instead, he lowered his weapon and extended a hand to his fallen foe. "Yield," he said, his voice calm but firm. "The fight is over." Branor hesitated for a moment, his eyes burning with hatred and humiliation. But at last, he reached out and grasped Torrhen's hand, allowing the younger warrior to pull him to his feet. Marna stepped forward, her face split into a grin. "Well fought, Torrhen, son of Harren," she said, clapping the young warrior on the shoulder. "You have proven yourself worthy of my tutelage and a place among the greatest warriors of Winterkeep." And so it is said that Torrhen's apprenticeship began in earnest. For 1 year and a day, he studied at Marna's feet, learning the secrets of the forge and the arts of war. And each night, Lyra would come to his chambers, her eyes shining with love and pride as she would lay in his arms. Under Marna's guidance, Torrhen grew in skill and strength, his name becoming a byword for courage and honor throughout the northern realms. And though he would face many trials and challenges in the years to come, he would always remember the lessons he had learned at the feet of the Iron Hand, and the love he had found in the arms of her daughter. At the end of a year and a day, Marna summoned Torrhen to her private forge, a vast underground chamber where the heat of the molten rock below could be felt through the soles of one's boots. The room was lit by the glow of the great forge fire, its flames casting eerie shadows on the walls. "Here, we shall put you to your final test," Marna declared. "You and I shall wrestle in the ring of my forefathers, the great northern lords of old. The victor shall be the one who wins the best of 3 falls." Torrhen hesitated, his brow furrowing. Marna, I cannot wrestle you," he protested. "You are my master, and a woman besides. It would be dishonorable for me to lay hands on you in such a way." But Marna fixed him with a stern glare, her eyes glinting in the firelight. "You will wrestle me, Torrhen, son of Harren," she said, her voice brooking no argument. "Or it shall be said that you feared to face me in combat, and your name shall be forever stained with the taint of cowardice." Torrhen swallowed hard, but he knew he had no choice. He nodded curtly, and began to strip off his armor and clothing, as did Marna. They took their places on opposite sides of the wrestling ring, their bodies gleaming with sweat in the heat of the forge. At the first clash, Marna seized Torrin in a grip of iron and threw him to the ground, knocking the breath from his lungs. But in the second bout, Torrin, no longer afraid of harming his master, used his greater strength to hurl her across the ring. In the third and final clash, they grappled in the center of the ring, their limbs entwined, their breath coming in ragged gasps. For an hour or more they struggled, neither one able to gain the upper hand. At last, Marna released her hold and stepped back, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "The student has surpassed the teacher," she said, her voice filled with pride. "You are now a master in your own right, Torrin, son of Harren." And then, to Torrin's surprise, Marna drew him into her arms and kissed him deeply, her lips hot and hungry against his own. And there they made love in the heat of the forge, their bodies moving together in a dance as old as time itself. Afterwards, as they lay entwined on the sweat-slicked floor, Marna presented Torrin with a gift, a war hammer of surpassing beauty and strength, its head forged from Valyrian steel, and its haft carved from the heartwood of a great weirwood. "This is Frostbane," she said, placing the hammer in Torrin's hands. "The hammer of the North. May it serve you well in the battles to come." And then Marna taught Torrin the secret arts of wielding the hammer, the technique that had been passed down through generations of northern warriors. With Frostbane in his hands, Torrin felt invincible, as though he could take on any foe and emerge victorious. But even as he reveled in his newfound power, Torrin knew that his time in Winterkeep was drawing to a close. And When word came that Marna had received a challenge from her own brother, the master smith Valen, he knew that the hour of his departure was at hand. Valen was renowned throughout the Northern Realms as a craftsman of unparalleled skill, but he was also a fierce and jealous rival of Marna's. For years, the two had vied for supremacy in the forges and on the battlefield, each seeking to outdo the other in feats of arms and artifice. Now, Valen had sent a message to Marna, challenging her to a contest of champions. "I hear you have a new student," he wrote, his words dripping with scorn. "Let us see if he is worthy of the name of Iron Hand. My warriors against yours in a battle to the death." When Marna read the message, her face grew pale with fear, for she knew her brother was a ruthless and cunning foe, and that he would stop at nothing to destroy her and all she held dear. But the challenge could not be refused, and so she began to gather her warriors for the battle to come. The night before they were to set out, Marna called for Ygritte, the master healer, and ordered her to prepare a sleeping draught that would render Thorin insensible for a full day and night. For she feared that her brother would target the young warrior, seeking to strike her through her beloved student. But Marna had underestimated the strength of Thorin's constitution. The sleeping draught, which would have rendered any ordinary warrior insensible for a full day and night, only held Thorin in its thrall for a single hour. As the two armies gathered on the field of battle, Marna was shocked to see Thorin's war chariot come thundering up to join her ranks. He had followed the tracks of her warriors, determined not to be left behind in his master's hour of need. The champions of both sides met in a clash of steel and fury, and great deeds of valor were wrought that day. Thorin and two of Marna's finest students faced off against 6 of Valen's mightiest warriors, slaying them all in a whirlwind of axe and hammer blows. But the victory was not without cost, for several of Marna's students fell as well, their blood mingling with that of their foes on the stony ground. As the day wore on, and the sun began to sink behind the mountains, the two armies remained locked in a stalemate, neither side able to gain the upper hand, And then, with a roar of challenge, Phelan himself strode forth from the ranks of his warriors, calling out to Marna to face him in single combat. But before Marna could respond, Torrin leapt forward, his eyes blazing with determination. "I claim the right of champion," he cried, his voice ringing out across the battlefield. "I will face Phelan in place of my master." Marna hesitated, torn between a desire to protect her student and her duty to answer her brother's challenge. But she knew that the Code of the North would not permit her to refuse Torrin's claim. With a heavy heart, she nodded her assent. But before Torrin could take the field, he turned to Marna, his brow furrowed in thought. "Tell me, master," he said, "what does your brother hold most dear in all of this world?" Marna considered for a moment, her mind racing. "His warhammer," she said at last. "Icebane, a hammer of the frost. He forged it himself, and it is said that it has never failed him in battle." Torrin nodded, his jaw set with grim determination. Then, without another word, he leapt onto his horse and charged out onto the field of battle, ready to face his foe. At first, Torrin was struck by how much Phelan resembled his sister. They had the same fiery hair, the same piercing blue eyes, the same proud bearing. But as they fought, Torrin began to see the differences between them. Where Marna's style was all grace and fluidity, Phelan's was raw power and brute force. His hammer Icebane seemed to move with a will of its own, seeking out Torrin's weak points with unerring precision. For 2 hours, the two champions fought, trading blow for blow, their weapons ringing out against each other in a deadly symphony. Torrin could feel his strength beginning to wane, his arms growing heavy with fatigue. And then, with a roar of triumph, Phelan struck a blow that shattered Torrin's axe, sending pieces flying across the field. Torrin fell to his knees, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Phelan stood over him, Icebane raised high for the killing blow. But even as the hammer began to fall, Torrin cried out in a voice filled with desperate cunning. "Look, Phelan," he shouted, pointing at Icebane. "Your warhammer is cracked in half." Phelan hesitated, his eyes widening in shock. He looked up at the hammer, and in that moment of distraction, Torrin seized his chance. With a burst of speed, Torrin lunged forward, tackling Phelan around the waist and hurling him to the ground. The two warriors grappled in the dirt, their breath coming in ragged gasps, their muscles straining with the effort of their struggle. But Torrin's desperate gambit had paid off. Caught off guard by the young warrior's sudden attack, Phelan was unable to bring his superior strength to bear. With a final, wrenching effort, Torrin pinned his foe to the ground, his knife pressed against Phelan's throat. "Yield," Torrin growled, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "Yield, and I will spare your life." For a long moment, Phelan was silent, his eyes burning with rage and humiliation. But at last, he nodded curtly, acknowledging his defeat. "You have bested me, Torrin, son of Harren," he said, "though it was by trickery and deceit." Torrin shook his head, a wry smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "A victory is a victory, however it is achieved," he said. "And you will honor the terms of your surrender, Phelan. You will make peace with your sister and give her hostages to ensure your good faith." Phelan hesitated, his pride warring with his sense of honor. But in the end, he nodded once more, accepting the terms of his defeat. "You have a clever tongue, young warrior," he said, a grudging note of respect in his voice. "Come and join me at my fortress, and we shall speak more of this matter." Torrin glanced to where Marna and the others stood watching, their faces etched with mingled pride and sorrow. He knew that they feared for him, that they sensed the hand of fate at work in his destiny. But he also knew that he could not turn away from the path lay before him. With a final nod to his master Marna, Torrin turned and followed Phelan from the field of battle. And in the years that followed, Torrhen's name would become legend throughout the north. He would become a great leader, a fierce warrior, and a cunning strategist, leading his people to victory against the forces of darkness that threatened their very existence. But always, in the quiet moments between battles and triumphs, his thoughts would turn to Marna, the master who had forged him in the fires of her wisdom and her love. For Torrhen knew that it was they who had made him the warrior he had become, and that their names would be forever linked with his own in the annals of his people. And wherever the name of Torrhen Ironhand was spoken, the name of Marna Ironhand would be sure to follow, a reminder of the unbreakable bond between master and student, between the hammer and the hand that wielded it. Before Aegon came to Westeros, before the Targaryens brought fire and blood to these shores, dragons ruled the skies of Valyria. The Valyrian freehold stood for 5,000 years, its power built upon the backs of dragons and the blood magic that bound them. 40 Dragon Lord families commanded these beasts, using them to forge an empire that stretched across half the known world. The Valyrians did not simply tame dragons. Through sorcery long since lost, they shaped the creatures from birth, binding them with spells written in blood. A dragon hatched in Valyria knew its master from the moment it drew breath. The bond between dragon and rider ran deeper than training, deeper than loyalty. It was written into the very essence of both. In the year 114, for Aegon's conquest, a girl named Daenys Targaryen dreamed of fire and ruin. She saw the 14 flames, the ring of volcanoes surrounding the Valyrian peninsula, erupt as one. She saw the ground split open and mountains collapse into the sea. She saw Valyria drown in ash and molten stone, every tower and pyramid consumed by the earth's fury. Her father, Lord Aenar Targaryen, heeded the vision. While other Dragonlord families scorned his fears, Aenar took his house, his 5 dragons, and all his wealth and sailed west to Dragonstone. There, on that volcanic rock in the narrow sea, House Targaryen made its seat. 12 years later, before the conquest, the doom came. 14 flames erupted in a single night. Earthquakes shattered cities. The sea rose up and swallowed the land. The peninsula broke apart, leaving only the smoking sea, a poisoned wasteland where demons are said to swim and ships vanish without trace. House Targaryen alone survived. They became the last dragon lords in all the world. For more than a century, the Targaryens remained on Dragonstone, watching the 7 kingdoms of Westeros tear themselves apart in endless wars. They raised their dragons in the island's volcanic caves. They kept the old Valyrian ways, brother wedding sister to preserve the bloodline, maintaining their silver hair and purple eyes, speaking the language of their lost homeland. Then came Aegon Targaryen, first of his name, looked across the narrow sea at Westeros and saw 7 kingdoms ripe for conquest. With him rode his sister wives, Visenya and Rhaenys. Between the 3 of them they commanded 3 dragons: Balerion the Black Dread, Vhagar, and Meraxes. Balerion had been born in Valyria before the Doom. By the time Aegon rode him into battle, the dragon was already over 100 years old, his black scales harder than steel, his wingspan vast enough to shadow entire villages. When Balerion opened his jaws, his flames burned black and red, hot enough to melt stone and turn sand to glass. He was the last living creature to have seen the freehold in all its glory. In the year 1 AC, after the conquest, Aegon Targaryen landed on the eastern shore of Westeros with fewer than 3,000 men. What he lacked in soldiers, he possessed in fire. Balerion alone would have been enough to strike terror into any army. His skull, preserved in the Red Keep after his death, measured so large that a mounted knight could ride through its open jaws without ducking. His teeth were swords. His roar could be heard for miles. When he flew overhead, his shadow was so vast that entire towns fell into darkness, and men called it the Black Dread. Vhagar, ridden by Queen Visenya, was smaller than Balerion, but still immense. Her bronze scales gleaming like burnished metal. Meraxes, Queen Rhaenys' mount, was said to be the most beautiful of the 3, with silver scales that shimmered in sunlight. Together, they were unstoppable. The conquest that followed became legend, 6 of the 7 kingdoms fell before Dragonflame. At Harrenhal, the mightiest fortress ever built in Westeros, Aegon gave Lord Harren, the Whore, one chance to surrender. Lord Harren, secure in his castle's massive walls and towers, some rose over 60 feet thick at the base, laughed at the notion of surrender. He claimed no dragon could breach Harrenhal's defenses. That night, Balerion circled the tallest tower and bathed it in fire. The stone itself melted and ran like candle wax. Every man inside cooked alive. Lord Harren and his sons died in their seats, their bodies found fused to the stone. Harrenhal has stood as a ruin ever since, its stone still blackened and twisted from Dragonflame. No lord has claimed it since it has prospered. Some say Lord Harren's curse still haunts those melted towers. Torrhen Stark, king in the north, marched south with 30,000 men to face the Targaryens. The night before battle, he climbed alone to Aegon's camp and saw 3 dragons. In the morning, Torrhen bent the knee without a single sword being drawn. The North remembers what dragonfire does to men. At the Field of Fire, King Mern of the Reach and King Loren of the Rock joined their armies. 55,000 men in total, the largest host assembled in Westeros since the Age of Heroes. They met the Targaryens in open battle on the plains, confident that numbers would prevail over Dragonflame. They were wrong. Aegon and his sisters attacked from 3 sides, the dragons flying in formation they had practiced for years. The 3 streams of fire converged in a single inferno that consumed everything in its path. Thousands of men died in moments, knights in their steel plates cooked inside their own armor. The heat was so intense that swords melted in their scabbards. Horses screamed and burned, the grass itself caught fire, and the smoke rose so thick that men could not see to flee. Those who survived the initial assault found themselves trapped in a ring of fire, with nowhere to run. Some threw down their weapons and surrendered, but the flames paid no mind to surrender. King Mern, the 9th of House Gardener, died in the inferno, along with his sons and heirs, ending his line forever. King Loren of the Rock survived by fleeing through the fire. with cloak and hair burned away. The field of fire broke the will of Westeros. After that, most lords bent their knees rather than face Dragonflame. Only Dorne resisted. The Dornish refused to meet Aegon in open battle. They had seen what happened at the Field of Fire, at Harrenhal, at every other place where armies stood against Dragonflame. So they did not stand. They abandoned their castles when the dragons came. They retreated into their deserts, into the mountains, into the deep sands where no dragon could easily follow. When the Targaryens flew over empty villages, Dornish archers emerged from hiding with scorpion bolts, massive crossbow quarrels designed to pierce dragon hide. Hundreds of scorpion bolts missed their marks, falling uselessly into sand or shattering against stone. But it only took one. At the castle of Hellholt, a scorpion bolt struck Meraxes through the eye as Queen Rhaenys flew overhead. The dragon fell from the sky, and Rhaenys died in the crash. Some tales claim she survived, and that she was tortured for years in the dungeons of Hellholt. Others say that she perished instantly when Meraxes struck the sand. The truth died with her. Aegon burned every Dornish castle he could find in vengeance. It made no difference. The Dornish would not be conquered by fire. After years of bloodshed, Aegon gave up. Dorne remained independent for another 2 centuries. A thorn in the side of every Targaryen king who followed. Still, 6 kingdoms had fallen. Aegon forged the Iron Throne from the swords of his defeated enemies, melted together by Balerion's flame. He took the title king of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the 7 Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm. The Age of the Dragon had come to Westeros. For 300 years, House Targaryen ruled through dragon power. Dragons were not simply weapons to the Targaryens. They were sacred, part of the family itself. When a child was born into House Targaryen, a dragon egg was placed in the cradle. Sometimes the egg hatched. Sometimes it remained stone. But when a dragon did hatch and bond with a child, that bond endured for life. The bond between dragon and rider went deeper than training or loyalty. It was forged through something the Targaryens called the blood of the dragon. The Valyrian heritage that ran in their veins. Some claimed a rider could feel their dragon's emotions, sense its presence from miles away. Others spoke of sharing dreams with their dragons, seeing through their eyes while asleep. Riders sensed their dragon's moods, their pain, their rage. When a Targaryen died, often their dragon followed soon after, refusing food until death took them as well. When King Ainis died, his dragon Quicksilver grew listless and weak. Claiming a dragon required courage and the right blood. Bastards with Targaryen blood sometimes succeeded where true-born children from other houses failed. During the Dance of the Dragons, common-born dragon seeds, bastards sired by Targaryens on small folk, claimed several dragons that had lost their riders. Some succeeded, others were burned alive or devoured for their presumption. Each dragon possessed its own temperament. Balerion was proud and terrible, aware of his own power. Vhagar grew aggressive with rage, hungry for battle. Syrax, the golden dragon ridden by Princess Rhaenyra, was beautiful but lazy, accustomed to being fed in the dragon pit and never wanting to learn to hunt. Caraxes, called the Bloodworm, had a serpent-like neck and a vicious nature that matched his rider, Prince Daemon Targaryen. Not all dragons had riders. Wild dragons nested in the caves of Dragonstone. The cannibal, a great black beast, had lived on the island since before the Targaryens arrived. He ate dragon eggs and hatchlings, and no one ever claimed him. Grey Ghost haunted the eastern shores, hunting fish in the sea. Sheep Stealer raided the flocks of nearby shepherds. These wild dragons proved that when dragons flew free and hunted for themselves, they grew large and strong. But the dragons kept in the dragon pit at King's Landing did not fare so well. The dragon pit was an enormous domed structure built to house the royal dragons in the capital. Yet something was wrong. The dragons raised within its walls did not grow as they should. Balerion had been 200 years old when he died. But the dragons born in captivity stayed smaller, weaker. Vhagar grew large. The others, chained and confined, never reached their full size. Maesters later theorized that dragons need space to grow. They need to fly vast distances, to hunt, to live as they were meant to live. Confining them to the dragon pit was like raising a wolf in a cage. It might survive, but it would never thrive. Some, of course, whispered darker theories, claiming the maesters of the Citadel had deliberately weakened the dragons, poisoning them slowly over generations. The maesters had always opposed magic, viewing it as a threat to the natural order they sought to preserve. Whatever the cause, by the reign of King Westeros I, the dragons were shadows of their former glory. Still dangerous, still formidable, but diminished. Then came civil war. When King Viserys died, he left the succession in chaos. His daughter, Princess Rhaenyra, had been named heir, but his son by his second marriage, Prince Aegon, also claimed the Iron Throne. Both had dragons. Both had powerful supporters with dragons of their own. And what followed was the dance of the dragons. A civil war so devastating that it nearly destroyed House Targaryen and brought dragonkind to the brink of extinction. Dragons fought dragons in the skies above Westeros. At Rook's Rest, Princess Rhaenys, called the queen who never was, rode her dragon, Meleys, against King Aegon II on Sunfire, and his brother, Prince Aemond, on Vhagar. 2 dragons against 1. Meleys, the Red Queen, tore into Sunfire with tooth and claw, nearly killing both dragon and king. Then Vhagar struck from above, ancient, enormous, unstoppable. She closed her jaw round Meleys' neck, and both dragons fell. Rhaenys died in the fall. Sunfire survived, though his wing was shredded and his body tore open. Above the god's eye, Prince Daemon hunted his nephew, Prince Aemond, in the skies over that great lake in the Riverlands. Caraxes the Bloodworm faced Vhagar, the largest living dragon in the world. They met at altitude, circling each other, breathing fire. Witnesses claimed the battle lit up the sky like a second sun. Caraxes locked his jaws onto Vhagar's throat and would not let go, even as Vhagar clawed him open. Both dragons plummeted into the lake, still locked together. Both riders died. They never found Daemon's body. In King's Landing, the small folk turned on the dragons themselves. Starving and terrified as the war raged around them, thousands stormed the dragon pit. A street preacher called the Shepherd led them, calling the dragons demons and abominations. The mob came with spears and axes and torches. 4 dragons were trapped inside. Dreamfire, Sharkos, Morgul, Tyraxes. The dragons killed hundreds with their flames. The mob kept coming. Sharkos, barely large enough to carry a rider, was swarmed and stabbed to death. Morgul and Tyraxes fell the same way. Dreamfire fought her way to the dome and smashed through. The entire structure collapsed on top of her. The dragon pit became a tomb for dragons and men alike. Across the realm, more dragons died. Sea Smoke, Vermithor, killed each other in the mud at Tumbleton. Tessarion, the Blue Queen, was wounded and captured, dying of her injuries days later. Silverwing fled and was never claimed again, living wild until her death, years afterward. In 2 years of war, nearly 20 dragons perished. The survivors, too young, were too traumatized to matter. Prince Aegon the Younger, Rhaenyra's son, had watched his mother fed to his uncle's dragon Sunfire. The boy was 10 years old. The trauma never left him. When the war ended and Aegon the Younger took the throne as Aegon III, only 4 living dragons remained. Warning: young pink dragon barely large enough to carry a rider. The cannibal, wild and unclaimed on Dragonstone. Sheep stealer who had bonded with a common girl and disappeared into the mountains. Silverwing, who roosted on an island in the bay and would accept no rider. Within a generation, they were all gone. Mourning never grew large. Cannibal vanished one day, never to be seen again. Sheep stealer's fate remains unknown. Silverwing lived the longest, growing old and lethargic. The last Targaryen dragon hatched during the reign of King Aegon III, who had watched his mother, Rhaenyra, be devoured by his uncle's dragon when he was a boy. The hatchling was a twisted, deformed creature no larger than a cat, with a stunted wing and blind in one eye. It lived for less than a year before perishing. For the next century and more, no dragon egg would hatch, despite every attempt the Targaryens made. Aegon III became known as Aegon the Dragonbane, though he had done nothing to harm the dragons. He simply had the misfortune to be king when they died out. Without dragons, House Targaryen ruled on legacy alone. They still called themselves the blood of the dragon. They still married brother to sister, keeping the bloodline pure in hopes that purity might bring the dragons back. Dragon eggs became priceless treasures, displayed at coronations and royal births, but they were only stone. Some Targaryens went mad trying to hatch them. King Aerys II, called the Mad King, became obsessed with fire. He filled King's Landing with wildfire. Thousands of jars of it hidden throughout the city, and planned to burn the capital rather than surrender it to Robert Baratheon during the rebellion. His King's Guard, Jaime Lannister, drove a sword through his back before he could give the command. Robert's rebellion ended the Targaryen dynasty in Westeros. King Aerys died in his throne room. His son and heir, Prince Rhaegar, fell at the trident. Rhaegar's infant children were murdered in the Red Keep. Only 2 Targaryens survived: the Mad King's youngest son, Viserys, and his newborn daughter, Daenerys. Loyalists smuggled them across the narrow sea to the free cities of Essos. For more than a century, there were no dragons in the world. Magic itself seemed to be fading from the earth. The Age of Wonders had passed. Then, Daenerys Stormborn walked into fire and was reborn. On the Dothraki Sea, Daenerys placed 3 ancient dragon eggs on the funeral pyre of her husband, Khal Drogo. She added to the body of the Magi Neri Mazdur, who had betrayed her. She walked into the flames herself. The mechanics of what happened remain a mystery. Dragon eggs need fire to hatch, but they also need blood, death, sacrifice. The Valyrians had understood this when they bound their dragons with blood magic. Daenerys gave the fire a witch's life, and perhaps something of her own. When the flames died, she emerged unburned, cradling 3 newly hatched dragons. Drogon, black and red like Balerion. Viserion, pale cream and gold. Rhaegal, green and bronze, named for her fallen brother. At first, the dragons were small enough to perch on her shoulders. Drogon, Viserion, and Rhaegal fed on scraps of meat. Their flames no hotter than candle fire. But unlike the stunted dragons of the dragon pit, these 3 had the entire world to fly in. They hunted. They grew. Within months, they were killing goats. Within a year, they could bring down horses. Their flames grew hotter, their wings stronger. Drogon, especially, named for her fallen husband, grew the fastest. His black and red scales hardening like armor, his roar shaking the ground. Within a few years, he was large enough to ride, large enough to burn armies. Targaryens had conquered Westeros. With 3 dragons, Daenerys would use hers to break the slave trade of Slavers Bay and Essos. She conquered Astapor first, the city of the Unsullied. Slave masters there laughed when she offered them a dragon in trade for their army of Enoch warriors. They thought her a mad girl who understood nothing of power. Then Drogon burned their chief negotiator alive. Daenerys commanded the Unsullied to kill every master in the city. Astapor fell in a single day. Yunkai yielded without a fight after seeing what happened to Astapor. Meereen, the greatest of the slave cities, tried to resist. Daenerys mounted Drogon and burned the fleet in the harbor, then flew over the city's massive bronze walls to show them that no walls could keep out dragon fire. The city opened its gates. When the slavers came for her with their sellsword armies and ships, Daenerys burned their fleets. The dragons were weapons of war once more, just as they had been in the days of Aegon the Conqueror. But dragons are not easily controlled. In Meereen, Drogon killed a child. Daenerys chained Rhaegal and Viserion in the catacombs beneath her pyramid, trying to prevent more deaths. It achieved little. A dragon can be bonded, can be ridden, but in the fire, they remain wild. Daenerys finally sailed for Westeros. She brought all 3 dragons with her. The first time in over a century, dragonfire returned to Westeros skies. Then came the long night. The White Walkers and their army of the dead marched south from beyond. The living had no choice but to unite or perish. Beyond the wall, the Night King killed Viserion, and the dragon's body sank into a frozen lake. The Night King raised Viserion as a white, dead dragon whose flames burned cold and blue instead of hot and red. That dead dragon helped bring down the wall, which had stood for 8,000 years. the Battle of Winterfell, Viserion fought his brothers in the sky, while below the living battled the dead. When the Night King died, Viserion crumbled to ice and bone. 2 dragons remained. During Daenerys' assault on King's Landing, Euron Greyjoy's fleet ambushed them with scorpions. 3 bolts struck Rhaegal in the throat and chest. He fell into the sea. The waves took him. Only Drogon survived. And next, Daenerys, whether driven by grief or the madness that had claimed her father, used Drogon to burn King's Landing, even after the city surrendered. Thousands died as dragonfire consumed the streets. It was the field of fire and Harrenhal again, but worse, because this time the dragon burned innocents who had already yielded. Drogon burned the Iron Throne, that seat forged by Balerion's flame 3 centuries before, and carried Daenerys' body away. He flew east, some say, toward Valyria, toward the ruins of his kind's ancient homeland. No one has seen him since. Dragons in Westeros are gone. Drogon may yet live, somewhere across the sea. But without a rider, without a bond, he is only a beast. Dragon eggs still exist, hidden in noble houses and forgotten vaults. But they show no signs of hatching. The Targaryens proved one thing through their long history. Dragons have a way of returning. They survived the doom when all others perished. They survived the dance of the dragons when it seemed certain they would die out. They came back from stone and legend when Daenerys walked into the fire. The blood of old Valyria still runs in some veins. Dragon eggs still exist. Magic returned to the world with the coming of the White Walkers. Perhaps in time, whether in a few generations or a few centuries, someone will make the necessary sacrifice. Someone will provide the blood and fire needed to wake the dragons from stone. Until then, the throne rooms of Westeros stand empty of dragon lords. The skies remain clear, but fire once lit is never truly extinguished, and the memory of dragons does not fade.